Just let me say, though, that the springboard that Venice offers for artists is hugely important and has a track record that confirms that one's presence here does a number of things. Firstly, when we look at Australia's representation in the pavilion, it is impossible to think of the Chronicle and not think about recent Australian art, because we've never got it wrong. The fact that many of the artists that have exhibited here remain central to the story of Australian art confirms the importance not only to Australians, but the confidence that we have in presenting it internationally.
As reported on Arts Alive last week, Creative Australia, formerly known as the Australia Council, withdrew the appointment of artist Khaled Sabsabi and curator Michael D'Agostino to represent Australia at the Venice Biennale in 2026. Here's a run-through of how events unfolded. On Friday, February 7, Creative Australia announced with the usual fanfare that Sabsabi and D'Agostino, after an open call and peer assessment of proposals, had been selected to represent Australia at Venice in 2026. Clearly, the announcement set some wheels in motion. On February 12, the Australian newspaper ran a provocative article entitled "Your Taxpayers' Dollar at Work. Arts Council takes creative approach to racism," deeming Sabsabi an unsuitable candidate based on two works from almost 20 years ago. One, in their belief, glorifying the then Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. It was unclear if the authors had seen either work. And strangely, the article did not appear on the arts pages, but in a column called Margin Call, normally given over to stock market scuttlebutt. On February 13, perhaps alerted by the article, Liberal Senator Chandler challenged Senator Wong, representing the Prime Minister in the Senate, to explain, quote, "Why is the Albanese government allowing a person who highlights a terrorist leader in his artwork to represent Australia on the international stage at the Venice Biennale?" On hearing the issues raised, Arts Minister Tony Burke rang Adrian Collett, the Chief Executive of Creative Australia, demanding to know why his briefing paper did not alert him to these 20-year-old works and the controversy that might arise. However, the Minister insisted he did not tell Collett to fix it. Collett immediately called an urgent meeting of the board of Creative Australia that unanimously withdrew the invitation, saying, quote, "The board believes a prolonged and divisive debate about the 2026 election outcome poses an unacceptable risk to public support for Australia's artistic community and could undermine our goal of bringing Australians together through art and creativity." Protest resignations followed. Simon Mordaunt, the philanthropist and commissioner for Venice, the head of visual arts, and also the principal manager for Venice at Creative Australia, and the board member, Lindy Lee, all quit. The unsuccessful artist-curator teams insisted that Sabsabi and D'Agostino be reinstated, as did last year's Venice artist, Achin War. Green Senator Hanson Young called for a full and frank inquiry into Creative Australia's decision, and Margin Call, in the Australian, still on the case with column number 3, the call was, quote, "The first time ever we find ourselves in furious agreement with Sarah Hanson Young." Artist John Kelly, whose voice helped shape the reforms in the Venice selection process a decade ago, sees the need for more change in how our presence at Venice is managed. John Kelly, your immediate reaction to learning of this dismissal?
Well, I don't believe any artists should be cancelled, as they call it, after going through a selection process that was created by the body that actually basically controls the selection of the Australian representative at the Venice Biennale. They created the selection process, went through that, he was selected, being cancelled within a week of announcing it with such enthusiasm. It was just brutal and unfounded.
Well, has Creative Australia created a problem for itself, and what can be done about it?
Well, that's the old saying, you've shot yourself in the foot. What can be done about it? I don't know. They've dug a huge hole for themselves. I don't see how they can extract themselves except just do a mea culpa and just reinstate the artist.
Now, you've got some ideas about how the whole selection process, which you contributed to the debate quite powerfully about a decade ago, how that selection process could be improved, perhaps taken further away from any political interference.
Well, my interest in the Venice Biennale really came out of a lot of research I did back in 2002 when the Australian Council for the Arts employed Saatchi and Saatchi to advise them with a huge report on how to connect with ordinary Australians, which came up with the idea of branding the arts. And through that project, which ended up in the Moo project, the labels for David Walsh, it was just about the whole idea of branding the arts was just anti-art, basically. It was about conformity. And through that, I got interested in the Venice Biennale because I was living in Europe and I used to travel from about 2009, from memory, 2007 maybe, to Venice Biennale every 2 years. And just saw at a close hand how it was being controlled by two commercial galleries, which I started writing about, which sort of came to fruition in 2017 with the Walkley nomination for an article about Rosalind Oxley's artists regularly being exhibited. So I was very interested in how that and then from that came the Australian Council for the Arts at the time created a new system of selection, which was much more open, or it seemed to be. But even that was compromised through all the connections, as I wrote about in response to how they did the changes. So then just to come to this stage in 2024 for this selection, 25, sorry, for this selection, is just mind-boggling how they've got it completely wrong over the last 20-odd years. And I remember Doug Hall at one of the early Venice Biennales speaking on behalf of the Australian Council for the Arts, but they just seem to always get it wrong, or seem to. So my suggestion, which I wrote to the Minister of the Arts, or under the title, what's he, part of the Ministry of Infrastructure, which is an odd thing.
Yes, it's quite a long title, isn't it?
My suggestion is just throw it back to the states, because each state gallery and the two territory states have galleries with contemporary art curators who should be the professionals who see a lot, most of contemporary art being created in Australia. So why not do that and have the 6 states and 2 territories just be involved in the selection process? And what's mind-boggling is about how they've got an international curator coming from America. If I've got it right, Wasm Al-Qadiri, specialised in modern contemporary art from the Arab world, and chief curator of the Contemporary Art Museum in St. Louis. If I've got that right, and I hope I have, why would they bring someone from America? I don't think the Americans would bring an Australian or a British person over to help them decide what's going at the Venice Biennale, would you?
No, I wouldn't, but I wasn't aware that they had imported advice from overseas in selecting Sabsabi.
Well, they have it on their website, or the thing they put out about international thing, and they, and they've done it in the past. I remember I think it was in 2017, they brought, I think she might have been Australian, but she was working for a commercial gallery in New York, and she was part of the advisory group, advisory persons there. I can't remember her name offhand, but so I don't think it's been unusual. I think having curators of contemporary Australian art would be much more appropriate to actually make the selection process, to be part of the selection process.
In a way, that would democratise the selection process by moving it into the hands of Australians from all states in Australia. But would the administration of the pavilion and the general business of managing it remain with the Creative Australia? Well,
yes, I think it should be under the auspices of the Creative Australia. Why did they change the name from the Australian Council for the Arts?
New broom, new government.
But isn't that just rebranding?
Yep. Well, finally, John, what positive do you think can come out of this event?
Well, funny enough, Shadow Minister of the Arts, the Tasmanian Senator, she makes a good point that, with most or nearly all Australian artists trying to live off their art, I think she puts a figure at about $20,000 is well below the poverty line. I think she has a good point there. Whilst these administrators, what does she call them, plum jobs with large income, a good thing could come is maybe take the hundreds of millions of dollars that Creative Australia get over the 4-year period that they're funded, be distributed back to the artists directly through, as I suggested to the Arts Minister, an artist exemption, as they do in Ireland. I think the Senator has a point that there needs to be some really deep thought about how we move forward in supporting the arts in Australia. I think this new Creative Australia is just even the name. Does that mean accountants, creative accountants, could apply for funding?
That's a question I can't answer.
But it is a schmozzle, and one hopes that from any upset like this, hopefully some good can come out of it. Unfortunately, we're going into an election, which, and that's where you come back to the press getting involved in this, and it becomes an election issue, and it just feeds into a narrative that is just not very healthy, I don't think. And it distracts us from the real issues at play in politics at the moment.
Well, John Kelly, speaking to us from Ireland, thank you very much for speaking to Arts Alive.
Well, thank you very much, Vincent, for reaching out to me. That's nice. Thank you.
We've never got it wrong.